Hello, in this video we will discuss about the muscle fatigue. Basically, the muscle fatigue is the problem which that is not a long life, but it is during the exercise it accumulation of the lactic acid is known as the lactic acidosis. So here is the person which that is consume the oxygen, and oxygen is come from the plant during the photosynthesis and consume the carbon dioxide from the plant. So this carbon dioxide will be exhaled in from the lungs and inhale the oxygen into the lungs. And after the deficiency of the oxygen will lead to muscle fatigue. So here is the oxygen used in the muscle as well as other tissues. So here is we will discuss about the aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration means the oxygen is used to the cell for Krebs cycle and electron transport chain and produce carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide will be exhaled. So let's begin to understand. The first is the anaerobic respiration. So first of all we will discuss about the when input of oxygen less than consumption of oxygen, then anaerobic respiration will be occur, and that's lead to muscle fatigue and produce the lactic acid accumulation. So this lactic acid is causing the different type and different ways. For example, lactic acid is also produced during the acute hypoxia. It means the acute deficiency of oxygen during the high intensity workout. While in the other case, the anemia means the red blood cell which that is unable to complete binding of the oxygen with the hemoglobin. On the other hand, the carbon monoxide poisoning. This carbon monoxide, when enter into the blood, it means the affinity of the oxygen with the hemoglobin will be decreased due to the complete tight bond as compared to the carbon dioxide. And cardiogenic shock or septic shock can be. On the other hand, the separately systemic disease, liver failure, malignancy, drug or toxin and metformin, cyanide and propofol and insulinizide is the major cause for it. So let's begin to understand first of all the anaerobic respiration, that is the glycolysis. And this glycolysis basically is a glucose breakdown without using oxygen is known as the anaerobic respiration, which can be produced the 2 ATP as well as the 2 NADH. So this 2 ATP is used as energy during the anaerobic respiration. When we will doing the hard exercise after this, so the oxygen consumption will be low. So it means the glycolysis will be produced the pyruvate, and this pyruvate will not enter into the mitochondria. So it means not enough production of ATP, which that is lead to hypoxia, and that will be lead to deficiency of oxygen will cause the muscle fatigue. So here is I am classifying the aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. For example, the aerobic respiration, the 2 pyruvate will be entered into the mitochondria and coenzyme attached to release the carbon dioxide. The 2 carbon containing molecule is known as the acetyl-CoA. So this acetyl-CoA which that is entered into the Krebs cycle, and after the entry of the Krebs cycle to produce carbon dioxide which that is exhaled. While on the other hand, these produce Krebs cycle also FADH2, NADH and 1 or 2 molecule of ATP. So this ATP is used for another mechanism, but the more ATP is produced from the NADH and FADH2. This is go into the electron transport chain in the inner mitochondrial membrane to proton pump out from the inner mitochondrial matrix to move outer mitochondrial matrix. So this NADH is used as a pump out, and the 2 electron will be produced, and this 2 electron will be produced from the 1 NADH which that is flow with the which flow that is the complex in the electron transport chain, which that is enzymatically activity and produce more pump hydrogen ion outside. So here is basically is when move out, it means that when ATP synthetase enzyme used to enter again and 4 proton will lead to produce the 1 ATP. So this ATP and electron will be separated with the reductase enzyme to 2 electrons separate to produce the water with the combination of the proton and oxygen. So that is why oxygen is very important for the aerobic respiration, and that is why it produces a high amount of ATP. But in the case of anaerobic respiration, the 2-pyruvate will be produced, which that is produced the 2-NADH is used when the lactic acid produced. So it is anaerobic respiration. This 2 lactic acid basically is the accumulation of the lactic acid into the muscle, and it will be increase the lactic acid, drop pH, more acidic cause acidosis. So that will be lead to acidosis. So here is the lactate dehydrogenase enzyme, which that is can be reversed the lactate into the pyruvate when we will going to rest. So the lactic acid dropped pH, more acidic cause acidosis. So that means the number of proton will be increased. It means that lead to decrease the pH will be more acidic, and that is known as the acidosis. But it's not it is limited not throughout the day or throughout the life, but it can be reversed by the lactate dehydrogenase enzyme. So let's begin to understand the metabolic acidosis. Basically is the longer time of the acidosis will be occur, it lead to increase the brain central nervous system, which that is the headache, sleepiness, confusion, loss of consciousness and coma. Why? Because the normal function of the brain, which that use the ATP more due to the glucose, but glucose will be not completely breakdown in the form of ATP, so the lactic acid will be produced after the pyruvate formation. So the muscular weakness, so the muscle weak due to the less amount of the ATP, so that is why the muscle fatigue will be occur. So that is why the muscle fatigue and the heart arrhythmia and increase heart rate. So on the other hand, the gastric, we will discuss about the nausea, vomiting, intestinal diarrhea in the case of the intestine, while in the other hand the stomach will be move out the anti-peristaltic movement to lead out the food. So that is known as the sympathetic nervous system will be promote this function. So the respiratory we will discuss about the shortness of breathing, pulmonary disorder and coughing, which that is lead to increase due to the metabolic function. Basically is the not just only the it is can be caused due to the anemia or some blood loss during the injury, for example, which that is lead to metabolic acidosis. Why? Because the binding with the hemoglobin affinity with the oxygen is decreased. So that is why. On the other hand, the sickle cell anemia is also produced the muscle fatigue as well as the metabolic acidosis. So the lactic acid in circulatory failure and regional ischemia will be occur when the oxygen will be decreased. So the here is the adrenaline. Adrenaline is the hormone which that is bound with the beta receptor to separate the G coupled protein receptor to separate the alpha unit of the G coupled protein. So that will be intracellular domain will be separate. The active G protein will be lead to active the adenyl cyclase activation to increase the pyrophosphate and release the cyclic AMP. This cyclic AMP will trigger the protein kinase to active protein kinase A. This protein kinase A is different function. For example, the gluconeogenesis and the DNA synthesis or some other reason. So on the other hand, the potassium and sodium ATPase pump is used for it. So it means the increasing of the ATP is due to the active protein kinase enzyme to increase ATP, but the massive amount of ATP used for increased metabolism and increasing metabolism demand, and it means the increasing metabolism demand to lead to increase the glucose. So increase glucose due to the gluconeogenesis. But important thing is that the pyruvate will be formed, not complete aerobic respiration due to the deficiency of the oxygen. So it means the complete again and again glucose breakdown will lead to produce ATP, which that is the slight ATP. But important thing is that the cyclic AMP will be produced. So the cyclic AMP will be produced due to this ATP, and that is pyruvate converted into the lactate in the presence of deficiency of oxygen. So that will lead to produce lactate. So this lactate will be enter during the excretory system. So the excretion in the nephron we will discuss for the acid-base balance in the body. So important organ is the kidney, which that is used for the mechanism for decreased lactic acidosis in natural way. So here is the nephron, which contain a proximal convoluted tubule, distal convoluted tubule, and collecting duct and loop of Henle. And here is the glomerulus, which that supply the blood. After the filtration, basically when we see here is the proximal convoluted tubule contain lumen. Into the lumen we will discuss here, and inside of the lumen is the carbonic acid as well as the carbonic ion. So the hydrogen bicarbonate basically. So when hydrogen bicarbonate, which that is here, and here is the lactate, basically the lactic acid formation. This lactic acid is basically here is lactate will be entered into the tissue proximal tubule cell, which that is excretory system, and this increasing of the lactic acid due to the carbon dioxide efficiency and deficiency of the oxygen. And in this way the carbonic acid will be dissociate. Why? Because for decreasing of the decreasing of the acid, so it means convert into the hydrogen bicarbonate. So that is why hydrogen bicarbonate conversion and the proton will be inhibited by the lactic acid. So proton will convert this the hydrogen bicarbonate with the carbonic anhydrase enzyme used to carbon dioxide and water. This carbon dioxide diffuse into the cell, the proximal tubular cell, and that will be lead to exhale this carbon dioxide, and the water is the important part. So that thing is used for the acid base balance, and the excess of the carbonic acid or excess of the hydrogen bicarbonate will be excreted if for the resolving the problem of muscle fatigue. So that is why important thing is that the muscle fatigue is due to the less amount of oxygen consumption but the high energy requirement.